All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Cal Ewing, and I am here with my special guest, Mike Wolf, who is pretty well known as a Canadian who invests in U.S. real estate. Mike's been doing this for many, many years, even though he's very young, of course. But he's got a ton of experience and does a lot of training for not only Canadians, but Americans too, on how to invest in real estate in the U.S., particularly in cash flow properties, right, Mike? And just creating
Yeah,
passive income and freedom, lifestyle freedom, right? So thanks for joining me.
thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah. So I know, Mike, we've talked about this before, and I know you're when your presentations and courses, you talk a lot about passive income, financial freedom, buying your time back. Why is the passive income side of real estate so important to you versus like flipping or, the more shorter term active income?
Yeah, well, I mean, those other things are great too. But if all you're going to do for the rest of your life is flip homes, you can make a good living, but you will never have time freedom. And what I mean by that is, I've got a good friend of mine, and he's a very active flipper, very successful. Whenever I go to visit him, I can't just say, "Hey, why don't we go for lunch?" It's like I have to be in his car with him as we drive around, looking at all his different projects going on. And so I'm not criticizing doing that, but at some point, you get to the point where maybe you want to do other stuff besides your job every day. And so I recommend for people, maybe if you're just starting out, you don't have a lot of money, then maybe at first you're going to trade some time for money to get some capital to play with. But as time goes on, I really recommend people work smarter, not harder. And I have I have two, as you know, I've got two grandsons now. And when my daughter was born, she's almost 24. When my daughter was born, I literally didn't know how I was going to take a few days off to spend with my then wife and my newborn daughter, because my business so much revolved around me. And when my first grandson, Asher, was born around 3 years ago, it was the exact opposite, where literally if I wanted to, I could take the entire year. I could take 10 years off and never work and not have to worry about finances, because I had money coming in passively at the end of every single month. So a lot changed in those 20 years between my daughter being born and my grandson being born. And that's the stuff I love to teach people, is how do you get not just financially free, but how do you get free time freedom as well, so you can actually go enjoy the fruits of your labor.
Yeah, well, I agree. Like I know from my own experience, just talking to so many dads that aren't around because they're off going to work or living, working abroad or out in the field, away from their families and missing their kids growing up. And that's one of the reasons why I chose real estate too, is like, I just don't want to be one of those parents or grandparents. Right. And this is such a great option for being in their lives. Right.
Oh, for sure. And they grow up really quickly. And when back in the days when I used to be a workaholic, and back then I had a beautiful big house, I had the fancy cars, all the toys. And from the outside looking in, everybody thought I had the perfect life, and yet I really wasn't that happy. I had all this stuff, but there were lots of times where I would leave home, it would be dark out. I'd come home, it would be dark out, and I missed the entire day with my daughter. And in those days, I thought, well, to make up for it, we'll go on a week-long vacation or 2 weeks, and I thought that made up for it. But as you know, being a dad, missing those big events when they take their first steps, you can't replace that. And so you can't make up for it by going on a week or two vacation. There's no way to make up for that.
Sure. And the other thing is, like, people miss out on their own lives when they're just working day after day, right? Like, I mean, there's so many things out there for people to explore, whether it's travel or learning new things or a language or a new skill or sport. And most people just work until they're old and then they can't do it. Right.
Right. And when you trade your time for money, that's a challenge. Is one, we only have so many hours in a day.
Yeah.
And two, at some point, unfortunately, we all get sick and can't work anymore. We get too old. And then by then, maybe now, even if you're lucky enough to have financial freedom at that point, which a lot of people don't, but even if you're lucky enough to have that, you might have neglected your health all those years because being a workaholic, and you neglect all those other things that are really important. You neglect your relationships. So now here you are, you got money, but you can't even enjoy it, and you really don't have a life. And so it's so important to, these days, one of the things that I teach my students is that get your money on autopilot, and then make your primary focus, happiness and fulfillment. make that your currency instead of money, and your life will definitely look a lot different. And I do, as you know, I do a ton of traveling, but I also do a lot of humanitarian projects and volunteering, giving back, and hanging out with my grandkids, and all that stuff really lights me up, and you can't put a price on that. But the reason I get to do that is because the finances are in order. So don't ignore the finances, but don't make that your only thing, or that's all you do all day long is you're chasing money and you're trading your time for it, and you totally forgot to take care of your health and all that other stuff that's so important. So it's all about having that balance.
Well, how do you put your money on autopilot?
Well, the best way to put it on autopilot is to create passive income and what I like to call indestructible wealth. And so to me, there's a number of ways to do it. The best one that's worked really well for me, and I know for you as well, is real estate. And so, you could be a flipper your entire life. I'd recommend if you want to do flips, great, do them to a certain extent, but don't make that where you're working 18-hour days, and that's quite often what happens to people who are very active in real estate. So instead, I recommend buying properties in markets that make sense, where you're going to get good cash flow on your properties. So unfortunately, Calgary doesn't qualify for that, but also in markets that are ripe for appreciation, because that's how we create wealth in real estate. It's not just the cash flow, but also getting in a market, and when it jumps up and you get that $100,000, $200,000, $500,000, $600,000 paycheck a few years down the road, and the whole time you own the property was spitting out a paycheck every month, that's when your life will really get exciting. And so, but it's also, I call it indestructible wealth, because once you get a certain number of properties, that money comes in at the end of every month, and hopefully it covers all your expenses and then some. But I'm not a gambler, but if I were to go to Vegas tomorrow and lose every dime I've got in my bank account, at the end of the month, I'm going to get a whole bunch more paychecks coming in from all that rent. And so that's what I mean by putting on autopilot, where the money comes in effortlessly. You do something one time, get paid for it forever. So this real estate is really the goose that lays the golden egg. And the only time I ever dispose of real estate is to take my profits and reinvest in more real estate, maybe in a market that makes more sense. As you and I both know, real estate is very cyclical. And so there's times to get into a market, there's times to get out of a market. But once you've got that on autopilot, it's kind of like oxygen. We never stop to think, well, how many breaths of air did I have today? We don't think about it because it's so abundant, and yet it's the most important thing we've got. We can't live without it. So when you get your money to a certain point where you don't have to think about it, you're not worried about it, you know that all your bills are taken care of, your lifestyle's taken care of, and you can just put that on the back burner and not think about it, then you get to focus on the things that are really important in life. Like to me, I think giving back, just one of the things I had the pleasure to do is a number of years ago, and I can't remember if you came to New Orleans with me, but I used to do, I was bringing people there after Hurricane Katrina and raised a bunch of money and a bunch of awareness and fixed up a bunch of homes and brought a bunch of people back to New Orleans, and getting to do something like that, or bringing water filters to places that don't have clean drinking water. When you get to do that sort of stuff, that stuff is fulfilling, and it just lights you up. And having the big house and the fancy cars, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying I've been there, done that, and it didn't really light me up. And it's just you get a fancy car, and then your next door neighbor gets a better car, and all of a sudden your car is not good enough anymore. It's just you get in this cycle where we're not grateful for anything, and we're just chasing stuff. So I've learned over the years what is, at least for me, what's really important and what makes me happy. And it's not just having the fancy stuff and the money, but it's the stuff that you get to do once you've got that freedom. And that's what I love to teach people.
Yeah, and I agree that, having physical items and houses and all those toys and things are great, but being able to contribute is something that a lot of people just don't have space for in their lives, because everyone's so busy just trying to, get the bills paid and pay for all those toys. And like you say, what you remember at the end of it is the experiences you've had and the people that you've helped in those moments where, it's a feeling, not just buying something, right? So,
right. Yeah. The material stuff lights you up for a very short period of time, and then you need the next thing. It's like a drug, exactly. And you need something bigger and better, and just you're on this treadmill where you're just chasing stuff.
Yeah. So I hear a lot of people almost weekly that I talk to, because I still live in Canada, and you're from Canada too, talking about how they're scared to invest in the U.S. They don't think it's a good idea. And a lot of even real estate training always says, well, just invest in your backyard or your own city. So you're teaching the opposite, which I've been doing since I met you. Tell me why you think that's the best idea.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like, imagine that I was trying to sell you a McDonald's franchise. And let's say you lived in Antarctica. And I said, you know what, I can sell you, we'll build a McDonald's right next door to you. Well, unless penguins start eating burgers, you're probably not going to do very well. And let's say your other choice for the exact same amount of money, I said, I can get you a McDonald's franchise in Times Square, New York. Which one would you pick? Well, New York is obviously, I mean, it's a no-brainer, right? And so you're going to go where you're going to get the best return on your investment. Hopefully, you're not going to pick something out of convenience. And so when we get into real estate markets strictly by default, because that's where you live, the challenge that you have is that, you know, your freedom is on the other side of, you know, having that money on the back burner, like I just mentioned, having that on autopilot. And so the harder your money is working for you, the sooner you get your freedom. So number one, if you're a cash flow investor, you're trying to do it in Canada, you're going to have a lot of money just to get started, let alone to be successful. And so you've got a lot of challenges ahead of you. Whereas in the U.S., and the U.S. isn't one market. Obviously, I'm not saying buy it just randomly. If you go to L.A., it's just as bad as it's actually worse than Calgary. Yeah. If you go to New York City, it's worse than Calgary. So there's markets that are good, there's markets that are bad. Unfortunately, in Canada, we're taxed to death. So every time you do a transaction, even if you make money, the government takes a piece of that, and you get to reinvest what you have left over. In the U.S., you can basically use something that they've got there called the 1031 exchange, and this is strictly for people buying and holding properties. You have to hold the property over a year. But if you do that and you sell the property and you take the proceeds and invest in more real estate, you're not going to pay. You get to defer the capital gains tax, meaning that you get to take 100%. If you buy a property for $100,000, sell it for $300,000, you can reinvest all $300,000 in more properties. Whereas in Canada, you would pay capital gains on your profit. You can only invest what you have left over. So when you have all these different hurdles that you're having to overcome just because it's more convenient, then you're basically saying, hey, I'm only retire 10, 15, 20 years later because I don't want to see what's on the other side of that border. And, you know, on the other side of the border, not only is it more favorable tax-wise, my favorite market right now is Atlanta, Georgia. And I'm reselling properties, single-family homes, for $70,000. In Calgary, that's not even a shed. So in Vancouver, I don't think you can get a car in Vancouver for $7. I mean, the money does not go far in Canada, and so you can get in the market a lot more easily. And there is, by the way, financing for Canadians. So a lot of Canadians, they just see it as challenging because they don't know the realities. They think, oh, I can't get financing, or they think that, oh, I'm going to get taxed to death, whereas actually in reality you're going to pay less tax down there. So they're making their decisions based on a lot of misinformation, and they're really missing out on a lot of opportunities. And that's what I'm here for, is to show people that, yes, as Canadians, we're not restricted to just where we live, and certainly not even in our country, because there's nowhere in Canada that I'm aware of that makes sense financially right now to be a buy and hold real estate investor.
Yeah, I agree. And here's what I've learned is that every market has its challenges, whether you decide to buy in your own backyard or Atlanta or anywhere else. I mean, there's things you're going to have to learn how to do, challenges you're going to have to overcome, and a learning curve. So why not face those challenges where it makes sense, right? Because they're going to be there. And the great thing is, for all you guys watching, is that you've got people like Mike and myself who are already doing this. So we can help you get through those challenges and you know, move that curtain aside so you can figure out how to get this done the right way with the right teams, so you're not going to make mistakes, right?
Well, that's really the key is one, obviously don't try to figure stuff out yourself. If you don't understand the tax ramifications, we'll get somebody who's an expert on that. If you don't understand how to move your currency, you know, if you don't understand how to pick markets, these are things that are learnable. When I first started investing in the U.S., probably like 15 years ago now, time flies, probably about 15 years, I didn't know any of this stuff. And I didn't know any Canadians at the time doing it. I did it before the recession. During the recession is when it became fashionable for Canadians to invest in the U.S. I was already investing prior to that. And I had to learn all this stuff the hard way by trial and error, because I didn't know anybody else that was Canadian who was actively doing what I wanted to do. But the good news is I've already made all the mistakes and I've paved the way. And I know you've probably made your share of mistakes too along the way. and we can show people not only what to do, but also what not to do. But the bottom line is to just, invest close to home just because it's convenient. Like I said, if you're willing to have a job for an extra 10, 15, 20 years, as opposed to learning something that you can learn literally in a very short period of time, that's going to, take your investing to a whole other level and have your money work harder for you. It's just, to me, it's a no-brainer to go do that.
Yeah. And here's the amazing thing about investing outside of your city. And it's that you have to build the systems up front. And once you have those systems built, and this is just usually a team or a way of managing your properties, but then you can do it in, say, Peru, where you are right now, right?
I'm not here doing real estate, by the way, but yes.
I mean, you've got your systems going and now you're in Peru. You can run your business anywhere in the world because you've already set up the systems from the get-go. Whereas if you're buying houses in your own backyard and you're the one that's knocking on the door, collecting rent and fixing everything, well, you're never going to have real freedom, even if you're getting that cash flow. So you're almost building your freedom from day one. And that's another thing I like about it.
Yeah, well, really the key is delegation, and once you get your money freedom, we also have to get your time freedom. Because if you have lots of money but no time, then you're still not going to have much of a life, certainly not much of a lifestyle. And on top of that, like I said, one of the things I teach people is a very holistic approach, meaning, okay, I'm going to help you make the money, but I'm also going to help you to make sure that you've got your time as well. And during that time, I suggest that you look after things such as your health and relationships and all that other stuff that's so important. Because if you've got your money and your time, but you're sick, and because you worked yourself to the bone at some point, and you neglected all that, then once again, these are the things that if you want to have the lifestyle of freedom where you get to have fun every day, you got to. It's a very holistic approach to life. It's not just the money part and not just the time part. But once you've got the time, that's how you use that. And so, but it's really important to delegate, have other people do the work for you. So I strongly recommend that you're not, even if you own a rental property next door to you, get somebody else to deal with the tenant, to collect the rent, all that stuff. Get somebody who treats it like a business, because a lot of times we have too much emotion in the game. And I still own some properties in Calgary that I bought a long, long time ago. I haven't bought anything in Calgary in years, but I still own a few properties. And I know whenever I drive by them, and I don't purposely drive by them, but sometimes I have to get where I'm going. And you see that, oh, the grass is too high, or why they have the garbage can there. And you start micromanaging it, and it actually starts to be stressful. Whereas when you have other people dealing with your properties, you don't even see them, and the team deals with everything for you. Now you've got hopefully no stress. The money's coming in effortlessly, and other people are doing all the work for you. And once again, it comes down to having also the right systems in place so the teams know what they're doing as well. So you hit the nail on the head when we talk about systems. Once you have that, then you can do whatever it is that lights you up every single day. And that's really, to me, the key.
That's the goal. So a lot of you guys might be wondering, okay, well, that's fine and dandy, but how the heck do I get started doing that? And Mike, you have an event coming up in Atlanta in May. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, my favorite market in the U.S. right now, actually in the world, is Atlanta, Georgia, for a number of reasons. And if anybody's curious about that, I can certainly give them access to a webinar where I give great detail on how I picked that market. But in any case, I'm doing a 2-day training there. And day one is all about all the stuff that you need to know to get started. How do you pick, if we're not going to invest close to home, how do we pick the right market? Within that market, how do we know what areas to invest in? What kind of properties do I want to buy? How do I build a team? How do I put the systems in place? How do I get started maybe if I don't have a whole lot of money? These are all the things that people need to know when they're first starting out. So we're going to cover all that. I'm also going to be teaching some of my strategies that I've done over the years that have worked the best for me to find good deals on properties. I'm going to be teaching that in detail. Also giving out some of the marketing materials that I've used in the past that have attracted a lot of sellers. So I'm going to be teaching all that stuff on day one. Day two, I'm actually going to pull back the curtain and take people behind the scenes in my operation and show them some of my turnkey properties. So these are homes that my teams and I, we buy them in bulk. We inspect them, we fix them, put tenants in place. I've got my property management team that looks after these properties. And so you're going to see behind the scenes that all the stuff that goes on. And you can apply this to your own real estate business as well. You might not do it on the scale that we're doing to start, but you can certainly take some of that. And I teach you some of the strategies that we use for getting better tenants and, once again, getting into the right neighborhoods where the homes rent really easily, they resell really easily. And there's also an opportunity for people that, don't want to be hands-on and they just want it all done for them. They can actually purchase, if they're interested, purchase these turnkey properties and then adopt my teams. My teams are already looking after the homes and we've already picked the tenants for you and already fixed them up. So there's an opportunity for that. And for people who buy properties during the training, they get their money back so the training is absolutely free. So it's even better deal for them.
Yeah, well, and that's how I got my start, was buying houses through your teams. It was before you were in Georgia, but I think I've bought 4 properties through your teams and your turnkey systems, and it was amazing and easy. And I've talked to many other people that have bought your Atlanta turnkey properties, and they've all been extremely thrilled with how it has turned out. So that's definitely an option. But I also like how you're teaching people some of the basic fundamentals on how to do it themselves too. So it gives people that option. So
yeah, well, I realize that not everybody, has the money to get started and buy a turn,
Yeah, exactly.
Somebody who's got lots of money, say buy a bunch of turnkey properties and you're set. You get the cash flow, you don't have to do any work, you're done. But there's people that aren't there yet and they need to know how to make the money to get to that point. And so I basically am starting at the very beginning and I'm going to teach, what I would do if I was going back 29 years ago, which is when I started. If I knew then what I know now, I'm going to teach exactly what I would do to get to the point where you can just buy properties and hold them and not have to worry. But I know that not everybody starts off that way, because I certainly didn't. I know you didn't. And so I'm going to teach you how do you get there and what are the steps. And also for Canadians, how do you do it properly? How do you invest properly south of the border? Because if you do it wrong, you will get double taxed. And there's withholding tax. There's a whole bunch of things that I learned by doing things wrong and screwing up when I first started in the U.S. that I teach you not to do. So I'm here to help with that as well.
Awesome. So what's the dates for that, Mike? And a little bit.
Yeah. So the dates are May 4th and 5th. And I recommend coming in the day before. And if you've never been to Atlanta, it's a great city to hang out in. So I recommend maybe you stay a day or two after if you get a chance. But the actual training, May 4th, we're going to be in the classroom. May 5th, we're going to be cruising around Atlanta, looking at some of the turnkey properties. I'll be teaching on the bus as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Very cool. I'm just sharing your webpage for this event, Mike. So
great. Thank you.
Guys and gals, I'll send a link to this webpage so you can get more information on this. I'm just going to stop sharing here.
So this is actually the first time that I'm actually doing this training. I've done a lot of other trainings. I've never done my Passive Income Academy live training, and I'm really excited for it because I've incorporated a lot of back in the old days, I used to just teach here's how you make money, and it was all about the money part. Now I've incorporated a lot of personal development and mindset stuff, and because I really want to help people have just an amazing lifestyle, not just the money.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes you really different as a real estate investor and coach and mentor, is that you're focused on that, because there is so much more than just the money. And I think that's what gets forgotten, is like a lot of us need training on that too, because we're just told to get an education and get a job and then that's it. So it's like when that's gone, well, how do we build our lives? And there's not a lot of resources out there. So I think that's really
I think that's why there's so many stressed out people, because we're all, one of the things I've had the good fortune of traveling around the world, several times. And one of the things I've learned is in other parts of the world, I've met people like in Thailand that literally don't know where their next meal is coming from, let alone paycheck. They don't know where their next meal is coming from. And yet they're smiling and they're happy and grateful. And I've had some amazing experiences in my travels. And when I come back to North America and I see that we supposedly have everything that the media at least makes it look like that we need to be happy, all the fancy stuff, and we're all miserable because we're fighting traffic to get to a job we don't like. We're all workaholics. We're stressed out, and that's not what I want to teach people how to do. I want to teach people how you get away from that and how you have, get to do the stuff that you love every day. And real estate's one of several means to doing that. I'll be teaching that also. I also talk about a lot of other entrepreneurial stuff during my trainings, but it's all about, the goal really to me is to get just get that money on autopilot. And so you don't have to think about it, and then treat it like that oxygen analogy where you don't think about it, and then focus on the stuff that really matters and lights you up. And it doesn't have to be what I like, doesn't it? You don't have to go and travel full time or be a volunteer. Whatever it is, whatever makes you happy. Maybe it's just spending more time with the kids, or whatever that looks like for you. It's doable, but you have to have the right mindset, and you also have to be able to get over that money hurdle as well, because a lot of people get stuck on the money because we're not taught that in school. We're taught just go get a job and keep trading your time for money. And I used to work 15, 16-hour days, and that's not how you get ahead. So so don't do that.
Sorry about that. That's awesome. Okay, guys and gals. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a link to Mike's website that has more information on the Passive Income Academy, which is, you said, May 4th and 5th, 2019 in Atlanta, Georgia, right? So all the details will be provided there if you're interested, all right? And yeah, Mike, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Information. This sounds really cool. I've done multiple tours with Mike. We did some in Vegas, some in Texas, and it's always an awesome time. The groups of people that you attract, Mike, to your events and courses they're always just great people. Always have like a really positive mindset, really intelligent, and then we go and have fun and we see the city.
Exactly.
So it's more than just training. So if you guys are interested, I definitely click the link provided with this video. All right, man. Appreciate your time. I'll let you go enjoy Peru.
Thanks for having me, Cal. Good to see you, buddy.
You as well. Take care.
Take care.